Across the Texas Hill Country, rain has erased drought color from a famous piece of the map, while one nearby aquifer district still warns that groundwater remains trapped in Stage 3 exceptional drought. That is the strange part. On the surface, relief looks real. The grass is greener. Creeks have stirred. Canyon Lake has climbed back to a little over 61% full. And in Gillespie County, the federal drought portal now shows 0 people affected by drought. After years of dry soil, empty stock tanks, falling wells, and towns living under restriction after restriction, that sounds like the ending everyone wanted. But that is not the scariest part. The scariest part is that drought can disappear from a map faster than it disappears from stone. Rain can fall hard enough to change a headline, while still failing to repay the water debt hidden below the hills. A drought map reads the surface. An aquifer remembers the years. So the real question is not whether Texas finally got rain. It did. The real question is whether the systems beneath Texas can recover quickly enough for the next dry season, the next heat wave, and the next wave of demand. For viewers following this story, liking, subscribing, and commenting with their location helps reveal how far this same water problem may already be spreading. The story begins in a landscape that knows both relief and danger too well. The Texas Hill Country is not a flat map. It is a raised, folded, limestone country of narrow river valleys, shallow soils, cedar breaks, ranch roads, tourist cabins, wineries, low water crossings, limestone ledges, and towns that depend on water moving through rock. It is a place where a storm can be beautiful from a porch and deadly in a canyon before sunrise. It is also a place where drought does not always look like disaster at first. Drought may arrive quietly as a pasture that fails to green up, a stock pond that becomes a cracked bowl, a well pump that begins to pull air, a spring that stops feeding a creek, or a water utility notice taped to a customer portal, warning that outdoor use must be cut again. Then rain arrives, and the emotional register changes immediately. A hill that had looked grey becomes soft green. Dust that had hung in ranch roads settles. The smell of wet limestone rises from the ground. In Fredericksburg and the surrounding countryside of Gillespie County, the change can feel almost cinematic because the drought map itself changes color. A red or orange region fades. A federal dashboard reports that no people in the county are currently affected by drought. For a viewer far away, that line appears simple. The drought ended, the rain worked, the crisis passed. But Texas water does not obey one dashboard. It is divided between the water seen from above and the water hidden below. Surface conditions can improve in days. Soil moisture can respond after one wet month. Short grasses can return quickly when rain arrives at the right time. River gauges can spike in hours. A reservoir can gain storage in a single storm sequence. But groundwater is different. It is not a puddle beneath the surface waiting to be refilled like a bathtub. It is water stored in pores, fractures, bedding planes, caves, conduits, sands, gravels, clays, and layers of limestone and dolomite. It has pathways, it has bottlenecks, it has thresholds, it has memory. That is why the same hill country can show a federal drought improvement in one county, while the Barton Springs Edwards Aquifer Conservation District, to the east and south of the most iconic hill country towns, still remains in Stage 3 exceptional drought. The district does not use the color of a weekly map as its only trigger. It watches Barton Springs flow and the Lovelady monitor well. It watches water moving from the invisible world into the measurable world. The difference matters because people do not drink a color on a map. They drink from wells, utilities, reservoirs, springs, and distribution systems. They depend on pipes and pumps, not headlines. They depend on whether an aquifer has enough pressure and volume to keep water moving when the sky turns dry again. The people affected are not abstract. They are domestic well owners in Hays County, who may not have the backup capacity of a major urban utility. They are families in fast-growing communities, such as Buda and Kyle, that must follow restrictions when groundwater triggers remain severe. They are ranchers who can see forage return, but still know that livestock water depends on a well or a tank. They are small water systems that do not have endless alternatives. They are campground operators, wineries, hotels, restaurants, hospitals, schools, and fire departments in a region where population growth and tourism keep adding demand even when the aquifers are stressed. They are also people downstream, because in central Texas, the old separation between surface water and groundwater is often a false comfort. Springs become streams. Streams leak into aquifers. Aquifers feed rivers. A lake level can influence recreation, water supply, property values, ecology, and regional confidence all at once. When one part of the system looks better and another part remains depleted, the question becomes more serious than whether the weather improved. The question becomes whether the public can see the lag before it becomes the next emergency. The official warnings reveal that lag. Barton Springs Edwards Aquifer Conservation District states that Stage 3 exceptional drought took effect on October 1st, 2025, and that exiting a drought stage requires both Barton Springs flow and the Lovelady Monitor well to rise above their thresholds. That detail is crucial because it rejects the easy story. One good indicator is not enough. One wet stretch is not enough. One green map is not enough. The district reports a 10-day average Barton Springs flow near 48 cubic feet per second and a Lovelady groundwater level around 456.8 feet above mean sea level in its latest posted status. Those numbers may sound technical, but they are the pulse and blood pressure of a water body. A spring flow number tells how much water the aquifer can push back to the surface. A monitor well level tells how much stored groundwater is standing in the rock. When those numbers are low, restrictions follow. In Stage 3, permittees face mandatory monthly pumping reductions, with different categories ranging from 30% to 100%, depending on permit type and source. That is not symbolic. That is water policy, translating geology into behavior. It means the aquifer is not only being observed, it is being rationed. It means a homeowner may look at wet grass and still be told not to water a lawn. It means a small utility may hear customers ask why restrictions remain after rain, and the honest answer is that the rain reached the surface faster than it reached the aquifer. That is why the viewer should care even outside Texas. The Hill Country is a case study in a larger problem appearing across a warming, growing, infrastructure-strained world. The signal the public sees first may not be the signal that determines resilience. A drought map can improve before wells recover. A flood can arrive before reservoirs refill safely. A green landscape can hide a dry water bank. A local rain event can end a visible drought while leaving a hydrologic drought in place. The number that makes this relief feel suddenly unstable is not only the rainfall total, it is the missing water after the rain. Canyon Lake, one of the most visible reservoirs in the region, sits at roughly 61.2% full, according to water data for Texas, with conservation storage around 231,600 acre-feet, against a conservation capacity of about 378,781 acre-feet. That means the lake is short by roughly 147,000 acre-feet from its conservation pool. An acre-foot sounds like a unit designed to make the public stop listening, but it is actually simple. It is the amount of water that would cover 1 acre of land, 1 foot deep. 1 acre is about the size of a football field, without needing to be exact. So, 147,000 acre-feet is not a small deficit. It is a missing landscape of water. It is water that would cover 147,000 acres, 1 foot deep, or 1 acre 147,000 feet deep, a ridiculous image that helps reveal the scale. It is a volume big enough to make a lake look improved and still deeply unfinished. It is the kind of number that carries 2 truths at once. The lake is better than it was during deeper lows. The lake is still far from full. That dual truth is hard for public emotion because people want relief to be clean. Either the drought is over or it is not. Either the rain saved the region or it did not. But water systems often live in the middle. A reservoir can rise, boat ramps can reopen, and still the region can remain vulnerable. Medina Lake tells an even harsher story. Water data for Texas shows Medina at about 9% full, with conservation storage near 22,880 acre-feet, against a conservation capacity of more than 254,000 acre-feet. Its water level is still more than 73 feet below conservation pool. Rain helped. The percentage improved compared with a month earlier. But a lake at 9% full is not a recovered reservoir. It is a warning with water in it. It is the difference between a patient opening their eyes and a patient walking out of the hospital. The first is good news. The second has not happened yet. This is where the headline becomes dangerous if it is allowed to stand alone. Rain ended the drought map in a place like Gillespie County, but the reservoirs and aquifers are not responding as if the water debt has been paid. They are responding as if a partial payment arrived after years of withdrawals. The system took the deposit. It did not erase the balance. There is another conversion that matters. A cubic foot per second, the unit used for spring flow, is 1 cubic foot of water passing a point every second. 48 cubic feet per second sounds like an abstraction, but it is a continuous movement, a river of seconds. Multiply it by time, and it becomes the living discharge of an aquifer. Lower that flow enough, and the effect is not only a smaller number, it is stress on habitats, swimmers, downstream users, water planning, and the confidence of communities that have built identity around springs and rivers. Groundwater level in feet above mean sea level may sound even more remote, but for a well owner, a falling water level is intimate. It is the difference between a pump submerged in water and a pump struggling. It is the difference between a well that works and a well that needs to be deepened, replaced, or abandoned. It is the difference between ordinary life and a household suddenly learning the geology under its foundation. The reason the numbers are unusual is not that Texas has never had drought or flood. Texas has always had both. The unusual part is the whiplash and the lag. The region can move from long drought into intense rainfall, from flood headlines into water restriction headlines, from visible abundance into hidden deficit, without giving communities time to reset their understanding. That is the cognitive hazard. People see water in creeks and assume stored water has recovered. They see a green county on drought.gov and assume wells have recovered. They see a lake rise and assume the reservoir problem is solved. But the most important number may be the amount still missing, not the amount that just arrived. The most important question may be where the rain fell, how fast it fell, how much ran off, how much entered recharge zones, how much was captured by reservoirs, how much evaporated under heat, and how much demand resumed as soon as people felt safe. In a normal news cycle, the story would stop at the color change. The drought map improved. Rain brought relief. Officials remain cautious. But this video is not about a normal news cycle. It is about the thing that gets missed when the first visible sign of improvement is mistaken for recovery. The overlooked mechanism is not rainfall, it is storage. More precisely, it is the difference between water that wets the surface and water that refills the bank. Not the drought map, but the water bank. A drought map is a composite signal. It uses precipitation, soil moisture, stream flow, reservoir data, groundwater indicators, vegetation health, expert input, and regional interpretation. It is an essential tool. It is not a lie. It is not meaningless. But it is also not a direct measurement of every well in the hill country. It can change quickly because some of its inputs change quickly. A wet May can improve precipitation rankings. Soil moisture can rebound in the upper layers. Vegetation can respond. Short-term drought categories can ease. That matters. Farmers, ranchers, fire managers, and water planners need those improvements. But groundwater recovery can lag behind because an aquifer is not just wet dirt. It is a storage system connected through geology. The hill country is famous for karst, a landscape shaped by water, dissolving limestone into fractures, conduits, caves, sinkholes, springs, and losing streams. In some Edwards aquifer zones, Recharge can happen quickly when streams cross porous or fractured outcrops. Water can disappear through stream beds, faults, fractures, and sinkholes into the aquifer below. That quick connection is part of what makes the Edwards so productive and so vulnerable. But the Trinity Aquifer, also central to hill country water life, is different in many places. It is layered. It includes limestones, sands, clays, gravels, and conglomerates. It can be lower yielding. It can recharge slowly. The Texas Water Development Board describes the Trinity as one of the state's most extensive and highly used groundwater resources, serving municipalities, irrigation, livestock, and domestic uses. Slow recharge matters because the hill country is not only asking aquifers to survive one drought, it is asking them to support growth while recovering from years of deficit. The hidden mechanism is called aquifer recharge, but that term needs to be made visible. Recharge is the process by which water from rain, runoff, or leaking streams becomes groundwater. It does not mean every raindrop that falls over a county enters the aquifer. Far from it. Some water runs off into creeks and rivers, some fills reservoirs, some is taken up by plants, some evaporates, some moistens shallow soil and never reaches the deeper system, some enters the wrong place, where the geology does not allow deep recharge. Some falls too fast and becomes floodwater instead of stored water. Some falls after soils have crusted, or when slopes are too steep for infiltration to dominate. Some enters fractures and conduits quickly, but moves through a system already affected by pumping. This is the central image. The sky can deliver water like a truck dumping cash into a city, but the underground bank only accepts deposits through a few narrow windows, pipes, cracks, and counters. If the cash lands in the street, it may create a flood before it becomes savings. If the deposit window is far away, the drought map sees the rain hitting the city. The aquifer records what made it into the vault. This is why the phrase "ended the drought map" is not the same as "ended the drought." The map may be correct for its category and timescale. The aquifer may also be correct in its warning. They are not necessarily contradicting each other. They are describing different layers of the same event. That distinction is where the story stops, being a local weather update, and becomes a systems lesson. In the old public imagination, drought is a lack of rain, and flood is too much rain. But in a stressed water system, drought and flood can be connected. Drought hardens soil, reduces vegetation, lowers base flows, depletes reservoirs, drops groundwater, and increases vulnerability. Then intense rain arrives, and instead of behaving like slow medicine, it can behave like a blunt force. It can run off quickly over shallow, rocky soil. It can race through steep valleys. It can produce a dangerous river rise. It can destroy roads, camps, homes, and crossings. And after the flood wave passes, the aquifer may still need months or years of favorable conditions to rebuild. That is the lopsided bargain of climate and geology. A flood can happen in hours. Groundwater recovery may require seasons. The person living above the aquifer experiences this through contradictions. A rancher may wake to wet ground and still keep livestock water plans conservative. A homeowner may watch native grasses return and still check a well level anxiously. A small town may welcome tourists back while keeping water restrictions in place. A county official may speak about flood recovery in one meeting and drought management in another. None of that is hypocrisy. It is the reality of stacked hazards. The surface has one timeline, the underground has another. The Budget Office of Nature has not closed the deficit just because the street outside is wet. To understand why, the mechanism has to be followed through the land. Rain falls over the hill country. If it falls gently for many hours or days, more of it can enter soil, seep through fractures, collect in streambeds, and feed recharge. If it falls in a short, violent burst, especially over steep terrain and thin soil, more of it becomes runoff. Runoff is not useless. It can fill reservoirs and rivers. But runoff moving too fast can also become destructive. It does not wait politely at the recharge zone. It follows gravity. It finds the low road. It gathers in draws, washes, creeks, and rivers. It jumps low water crossings. It pushes debris. It carries soil, branches, vehicles, and pieces of infrastructure. In Flash Flood Alley, the same storm that makes a drought map improve can also remind the region that it was built in a landscape where water moves violently when concentrated. Then, after the storm, the deeper accounting begins. How much of that rainfall became long-term storage? How much of the reservoir rise remains after releases, evaporation, and use? How much entered the Edwards recharge zone? How much reached the Trinity? How much was simply a wet surface over a still depleted system? That is why scientists and water managers watch wells and spring flows after the rain, not just rainfall totals during the rain. The well is the receipt. The spring is the proof of pressure. The reservoir is the visible storage. The map is the public signal. They all matter, but they do not move together at the same speed. The Edwards Aquifer adds another layer because it is a karst aquifer, meaning water can travel through solution-widened openings in rock. USGS describes the Edwards as recharged primarily through leaky streambeds over porous geology, with runoff and precipitation entering focused structures such as fractures, faults, and sinkholes. That makes it dynamic. It can respond dramatically. It also means contamination and urbanization can matter because water can move from surface to groundwater more directly than in some other systems. The Trinity, by contrast, often behaves as a slower, more complex, layered system in the hill country. A University of Texas Bureau of Economic Geology report on groundwater recharge in Texas found that recharge rates in the Trinity and Edwards Trinity Plateau aquifers generally range from only 1/10 of an inch to 2 inches per year. That does not mean no storm can matter. It means the annualized replenishment of deep storage can be small relative to public expectation. If an area receives several inches of rain, the average person may imagine several inches going into the aquifer. But recharge is the fraction that survives all the exits. Runoff, evaporation, plant uptake, shallow soil storage, wrong location, wrong intensity, wrong timing, and continuing pumping. The phrase recharge rate is dry language for a severe truth. The aquifer is not a bucket under the sky. It is a vault with selective doors. The doors open where geology allows, when rainfall arrives in the right way, and when the system is not being drained faster than it can refill. This mechanism can be followed through a single household. Rain falls on a roof outside Wimberley, Dripping Springs, Buda, or a rural road in Hayes County. Some is captured in a rain barrel or tank, if the house is equipped for it. Some runs into a yard and down a ditch. Some soaks into thin soil. Some evaporates after the sun returns. Some eventually enters fractures and moves downward. Below the house, a well draws from a water-bearing layer. That well has a pump. The pump has an intake. If the water level falls below a practical threshold, the household does not experience drought as a map color. It experiences drought as sputtering water, pump damage, expensive drilling, hauling water, or a hard conversation with a well contractor. From atmosphere to soil, from soil to rock, from rock to well, from well to kitchen sink, from kitchen sink to daily life, the mechanism is not abstract. It passes through a person. It passes through a family deciding whether laundry can wait. It passes through a rancher deciding whether to reduce a herd. It passes through a small business deciding whether expansion makes sense. It passes through a town deciding whether new subdivisions can be served without robbing older wells. It passes through a hospital that cannot treat water as optional. This is why the small break point in the system may not be a giant dam or a dramatic flood wall. It may be a well. More specifically, it may be the water level inside thousands of wells and the rules that determine how much can be pumped when that level drops. Wells are the quiet joints in the hill country water body. When they hold, ordinary life continues. When they fail, the crisis becomes personal and expensive. They also reveal inequality. A wealthy property owner may deepen a well, install storage, buy treatment equipment, or haul water. A lower-income household may not have those options. A municipal customer may be buffered by utility planning. A domestic well owner may be alone with the geology. A tourist may see only the green hills, the swimming holes, the wineries, the cabins, and the return of rain. A resident may see the hidden meter ticking. Historical precedent makes this story heavier because Texas has already been warned by the exact combination of drought, flood, and recovery lag. NOAA Physical Sciences Laboratory described the early July 2025 Texas flood disaster counties as having experienced drought since late 2021, the second longest uninterrupted drought period for those counties in the U.S. Drought Monitor record. Within those counties, there were 180 weeks of at least severe drought and 105 weeks with exceptional drought somewhere in the group. Those are not passing dry spells. Those are years of accumulated stress. NOAA also noted that on July 1, 2025, many counties in the disaster declaration area were still in drought, with Bandera, Kerr, Kendall, Gillespie, and Bay in exceptional drought. Then came flood. The public memory of that disaster is dominated by water arriving too fast in the hill country, especially along the Guadalupe River basin and surrounding communities. But the water supply lesson is not simply that flood can follow drought. In the 2 days from July 4th through July 6th, Canyon Lake rose 11 vertical feet, its largest 2-day rise on record at that reservoir. Yet at that time it still was only about 68% full, while Medina Lake was only about 6.3% full. That is the precedent in miniature. An enormous rise, a record rise, a visible rise, and still not recovery. This is one of the hardest truths for communities to absorb, because catastrophe usually feels final. A flood that kills, destroys, and dominates national news feels as if it must have changed the water equation completely. But hydrology is not narrative justice. The fact that a region endured devastating floodwater does not mean the aquifer was repaid. Water can destroy a valley and still fail to restore a groundwater system. Water can rise over roads and still leave wells vulnerable. The difference between a flood wave and recharge is the difference between money thrown through the air in a storm and money deposited into a specific account. Some reaches the account, much may not. Texas history is full of this paradox because the hill country is built for extremes. Steep slopes and narrow valleys concentrate runoff. Limestone and thin soils shape infiltration. Gulf moisture can feed intense rainfall. Long dry periods can reduce absorption and vegetation cover. Human settlement puts homes, camps, roads, and utilities near attractive rivers and creeks. The same features that make the region beautiful create risk. Spring-fed swimming holes, clear rivers, cabins near water, and towns built around scenic valleys also sit within a hydrologic machine capable of moving from scarcity to violence quickly. This is not new in the sense that floods never happened before. It is new in the sense that growth, heat, water demand, and climate volatility are changing the stakes. A past flood is not just a historical anecdote, it is a stress test. It asks whether warning systems were enough, whether low water crossings were understood, whether camps and homes were protected, whether water supply planning treated flood and drought as separate files or connected risks. The same is true of past droughts. The 1950s drought of record remains a central benchmark in Texas water planning. But every benchmark becomes dangerous if planners assume the future will simply repeat the old pattern at the old pace with the old population. A drought that once struck a smaller region now strikes a region with more people, more pavement, more wells, more lawns, more tourism, more demand, more expensive infrastructure, and more dependence on systems that cannot fail without cascading consequences. A flood that once crossed a rural road now may cross a corridor of homes, rental cabins, utility lines, and emergency routes. A low aquifer that once affected scattered wells now may affect entire fast-growing communities. This is the system widening behind the local rain event. The rain did not fall on a static Texas. It fell on a transformed one. Population has pushed deeper into the hill country and along the Interstate 35 corridor. Rural land has been subdivided. Water utilities have expanded. Domestic wells have multiplied in some areas. Impervious surfaces have increased. The demand line has climbed, while the recharge line remains governed by geology and weather. That mismatch creates the possibility of a new baseline. Not a permanent drought every day, not a flood every season, but a baseline in which the old expectation that one good wet period resets the problem becomes less reliable. The water system begins each dry stretch with less margin. The public begins each wet stretch with more confusion. Relief is real, but incomplete. Crisis is delayed, but not erased. The vulnerable layer of this story is where the abstract system enters institutions. A city such as Kyle or Buda cannot simply tell customers that the hills look greener, therefore water use can return to normal. Customers served by groundwater wells have to follow their provider's restrictions when the Aquifer district remains in drought stage. That can create frustration because the visible world and the rule world appear to disagree, but the rule world is responding to the hidden water bank. In Stage 3, pumpage reductions are not a public relations gesture. They are an attempt to slow withdrawals so the aquifer does not fall into worse emergency conditions. The weak point is not public understanding alone. It is compliance under emotional relief. After rain, people naturally want to resume normal life. They want to water lawns, refill pools, plant landscaping, reopen businesses, welcome visitors, expand projects, and stop thinking about drought. The human mind treats rainfall as permission. The aquifer does not. If use rebounds faster than groundwater, the rain becomes a pause, not a recovery. This is where the story gets uncomfortable, because the danger is not only natural, it is social. A drought map can change without changing behavior enough. A lake can rise without changing development assumptions. A flood can shock the region without changing where people build. A water restriction can exist without full compliance. A conservation message can be correct and still lose against growth pressure. The brittle component may be a pump, a well, a permit category, a subdivision approval, a low water crossing, a small utility budget, a flood warning gap, or a household's inability to pay for water infrastructure. Systems fail at small points first. A hospital does not need the entire aquifer to go dry to feel risk. It needs supply uncertainty, pressure problems, treatment constraints, or emergency demand during a heat event. A fire department does not need every reservoir empty to face difficulty. It needs hydrant pressure, access, and enough water during a fire or rescue. A rancher does not need every pasture dead. A single failed well can force herd decisions. A school does not need a statewide water crisis. It needs safe water and working plumbing during a restriction period. A restaurant does not need a regional collapse. It needs reliable water for sanitation. A family does not need a historic drought category. It needs the kitchen tap to work. The headline number can hide these points because large numbers make the crisis seem distant. 61% full, 9% full, 48 cubic feet per second, 456.8 feet above mean sea level. These are essential numbers, but the lived crisis appears in smaller forms. A pump cycling too often, a dry spring, a utility bill, a notice, a closed ramp, a low crossing, a shallow well, a water hauling truck, a neighbor asking whether anyone else's pressure has dropped. The human layer also includes communities with less power to adapt. Rural households on private wells may lack real-time monitoring. Renters may not control landscaping or water systems. Low-income families may not afford storage tanks, well repairs, filtration, or relocation. Elderly residents may not easily navigate emergency notifications or water hauling logistics. Agricultural producers face market pressure at the same time as water pressure. Tourism workers depend on visitors who come for rivers and lakes, but the same visitors increase water demand. Developers may be able to finance new projects, while existing residents worry that more straws are entering the same underground glass. The conflict is not simply between people and nature, it is between time scales. Development moves on financing schedules, weather moves on atmospheric schedules, aquifers move on geologic and hydrologic schedules. Policy often moves after the damage becomes visible. The hill country is now caught between all four. A wet month can create optimism in the development schedule. A dry aquifer can create warning in the hydrologic schedule. A flood can create urgency in the emergency schedule. A hot summer can create demand in the household schedule. When these clocks disagree, risk accumulates. The event says something larger about climate without requiring exaggeration. It does not prove that every specific storm, every specific drought category, or every specific well decline was caused solely by climate change. That would be an overclaim unless supported by formal attribution for each event. But it does fit a broader and well-documented concern. Warmer air can hold more moisture, increasing the potential for heavier rainfall when storms are able to produce rain, while higher temperatures can intensify evaporative demand, drying soils and vegetation faster and raising water use. In practical terms, the same region can face stronger thirst and heavier downpours. That is weather whiplash. The phrase may sound dramatic, but the mechanism is sober. Heat pulls water from soils, plants, reservoirs, and people. It raises outdoor demand. It lengthens stress on vegetation. Then, when moisture converges and storms stall or train, rainfall can arrive at rates that exceed the absorption capacity of soil and drainage systems. The water comes, but not in the form the aquifer most needs. It comes as impact. It comes as runoff. It comes as flash flood. It comes at night, through valleys, into roads and camps. Then the sun returns, evaporation resumes, pumping continues, and the groundwater ledger remains open. That is why hydrologic recovery cannot be measured only by whether drought color disappears. It must be measured by whether reservoirs regain durable storage, whether groundwater levels rise above trigger thresholds, whether spring flows strengthen, whether restrictions can be lifted without immediate relapse, and whether demand is aligned with recharge. A new baseline may not announce itself with one dramatic sign. It may appear as repeated contradictions, flood recovery and drought restrictions at the same time, green maps and low wells, rising lakes and still closed ramps, wet months followed by hot, dry months, communities celebrating rain while water districts warn restraint. The system response can become overloaded, not only by physical water, but by interpretation. Emergency managers must prepare for flood. Water managers must prepare for drought. Residents must interpret both. Media must explain both without flattening them into opposite stories. Politicians must make decisions that may be unpopular immediately, but necessary over years. Scientists must communicate uncertainty without losing urgency. Utilities must ask for conservation after people feel rescued. That is a hard message. It is harder than telling people that the drought is over or that disaster is coming. It requires telling the truth that recovery is layered. This is also where infrastructure becomes a memory device. Reservoirs remember through storage. Aquifers remember through levels. Springs remember through flow. Pipes remember through pressure. Roads remember through washouts. Floodplains remember through debris lines. Insurance remembers through claims. Families remember through loss. The problem is that public attention forgets faster than infrastructure does. After the rain, national attention moves on. The map updates. The footage changes. But the aquifer continues its slow accounting under the hills. That slow accounting is the part most likely to be missed. It is not visually spectacular. It does not produce dramatic video unless a spring stops flowing or a well runs dry. It does not roar like a flood. It does not glow on radar. It is a line on a monitoring chart, inching up or down. Yet that line may determine whether a community can withstand the next dry cycle. To keep the science honest, the story must separate what is connected from what is merely adjacent. The rain is connected to improved surface drought conditions. That is real. It improved soil moisture, vegetation, stream flow in places, and reservoir storage in some systems. The drought. Gov report for Gillespie County, showing 0 people currently affected by drought, is a meaningful signal for that county at that time. It should not be dismissed. Rain also helped Canyon Lake and Medina Lake rise, compared with earlier lows. That is real. But it is only part of the water system. The continued Stage 3 exceptional drought in the Barton Springs Edwards Aquifer Conservation District is also real, and it is based on spring flow and groundwater levels, not on public mood. The low percentage at Medina Lake is real. The remaining deficit at Canyon Lake is real. The slow recharge rates in Trinity and Edwards Trinity Plateau systems are real. The connection between surface water and groundwater in the Edwards region is real. What is not proven is that one rainfall event alone has restored the aquifers. It has not, at least not according to the indicators still showing drought stress in key districts. What is not proven is that a green drought map means every well is safe. It does not. What is not proven is that every flood or drought feature should be attributed directly and individually to climate change without a specific analysis. A responsible script does not need that shortcut. The risk is already clear without it. The risk is that a region can receive rain, reduce drought on a map, and remain structurally vulnerable because underground storage and surface storage recover more slowly than public confidence. The risk is that growth continues to add withdrawals while recharge remains uncertain. The risk is that future storms arrive in forms that produce more hazard than storage. The risk is that residents, seeing green hills, stop conserving before the aquifer has crossed its thresholds. The risk is that water planning built around averages cannot handle a world of sharper swings. That is enough. No exaggeration is needed. The facts create the tension. The rain fell. The map changed. The aquifer still warns. The lakes are still not full. The wells still matter. The future still depends on what happens below the surface. The final image returns to the map because the map is powerful. It is the public face of drought. When its colors fade, people breathe differently. They imagine an ending. In Gillespie County, the federal drought dashboard can show no people affected by drought, and that deserves recognition because drought relief matters. But beneath the green, limestone keeps its own calendar. Water moves through fractures, bedding planes, stream beds, and aquifer layers at speeds the public cannot see. Some of it moves quickly, some slowly, some not at all in the way people imagine. A storm can shout. An aquifer answers in a lower voice. The central message is not that the rain was meaningless. It was meaningful. It reduced stress. It improved conditions. It lifted lakes from worse lows. It changed the visible landscape. It gave ranchers grass, towns relief, and reservoirs a partial refill. The message is that rainfall is not the same as recovery, and map recovery is not the same as water security. A drought can end for one indicator while continuing in another. A reservoir can rise while remaining short by more than 100,000 acre-feet. A lake can double from catastrophic lows and still sit at 9% full. A spring can keep flowing and still be low enough to trigger restrictions. A well can survive this season and still be vulnerable next season. The question for the future is whether Texas will treat these contradictions as confusion or as information. If the public demands one simple answer, the system will keep surprising them. If rain means over, restrictions will feel irrational. If flood means abundance, groundwater will be forgotten. If a green map means safe, the next drought will arrive against weakened storage. But if the region learns to read water in layers, it can adapt more intelligently. It can conserve after rain, not only during panic. It can protect recharge zones, not only build new supply. It can plan growth around water budgets, not only around demand forecasts. It can improve flood warnings and water restrictions as parts of the same climate reality, not separate bureaucratic files. It can explain to residents why a creek can run and a well can still be in trouble. It can stop treating aquifers as hidden backup and start treating them as living infrastructure. The event will pass. The grass will change color again. The reservoir charts will move. The drought map will update. The public mood will swing between relief and alarm. But the lesson will remain under the hill country in stone. The world can now deliver too little water for too long, then too much water too fast, and still leave the deepest accounts unpaid. The rain ended a drought map. It did not end the need to recover. It did not end the need to measure. It did not end the need to conserve. It did not end the question beneath every green hill and every rising lake. When the next dry season arrives, Will the water bank below Texas have enough left to carry the people above it?